coming out to Canton Concrete today, and especially want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for coming out. We most especially thank the Lieutenant Governor for his stance on pro-business. It's businesses like this that are capital intensive, so any way we can reduce taxes or reduce the burden so that we can put the money back and buy equipment. As y'all can see, these trucks are expensive and it's a capital intensive business. So Lieutenant Governor, we appreciate your service and thank you for coming out today to talk business.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keep on, you're doing a heck of a job. Love what you're doing. Great outfit.
Get it turned on.
The coat works great. I love it.
Well, thank you all for coming out today, and particularly thank you to Jason McNeil and his lovely wife and his family for hosting us here today. We are glad to be here to talk about something that's really important. This business here is representative of literally thousands and thousands of small businesses around Mississippi that benefit from having a pro-growth, pro-economy governor. These small businesses around Mississippi, and this is a prime example of one, that benefits from having conservative legislators that understand what it takes to grow Mississippi's economy. And it's been asked a lot over the last number of days and weeks about how we can continue to grow Mississippi's economy. And I will tell you, it's certainly been heightened over the last couple of days as we have dueling TV ads in the governor's race. Mine talking about Jim Hood's desire to raise taxes on hard-working Mississippi businesses, his desire to raise taxes on hard-working Mississippi families, and then his response ad, which basically says he's not really for raising taxes. Well, my view is if he'll lie to you about his desire to raise taxes, what won't he lie to you about? Now, what we have behind me here today is a couple of different things, a couple of quotes from Jim Hood over the years. On the gas tax, for instance, he criticized us for years because we wouldn't raise the gas tax. He called it an easy solution. Well, it may be an easy solution for a lawyer who works in Jackson, but I can tell you raising gas taxes is not an easy solution for these guys who drive these trucks, who drive back and forth sometimes hundreds of miles each day to go to work. In fact, raising the gas tax would hurt Mississippi workers and Mississippi families more than it would hurt anyone else. You talk about Jim Hood's desire to raise the corporate franchise tax. He always couches that in terms of these big, bad out-of-state corporations. Well, the reality is that these big, bad out-of-state corporations that he thinks exist employ literally tens of thousands and really hundreds of thousands of Mississippians. And so when he's talking about raising taxes, he's probably talking about raising taxes on your employer. But he's also he never differentiates between what he believes is a good talking point for political purposes, talking about these big bad out-of-state corporations, and mom and pop shops like where we find ourselves today, that are locally owned, small businesses by Mississippi families who have been in Mississippi for many, many years. The reality is if we understand economics and we understand our desire to grow our economy, the way in which we do that, and we believe very strongly in this, we believe that if you want more of something in Mississippi, you need to tax it less. We need more capital invested in Mississippi to grow our economy, and that's the reason we passed the elimination of the corporate franchise tax, which will be eliminated responsibly. It'll be eliminated over time, and that's something that I'm very proud of. And so we're going to continue to work to make it easier. Honestly, you can sum this up pretty simply. Jim Hood and his liberal Democrat allies believe that government is entitled to 100% of everything you make. And anything that they let you keep, you ought to be thankful for. We, on the other hand, believe that government doesn't have anything that it doesn't first take from somebody else. And while there are core functions of government that we must fund, and by the way, Mississippi will spend almost $20 billion this year in our state budget. While there are core functions of government that we must fund, we believe that you know how to spend your money better than any governmental entity ever will. And that's a distinction in this race, and quite frankly, it is a clean and clear distinction that I think the voters of Mississippi deserve to know about. Now, Attorney General Hood is going to try to convince people over the next 2 weeks that he's not really for raising taxes, even though he's a liberal Democrat, and even though he has proposed $941 million in new spending. The $941 million is almost 15% of our general fund budget in Mississippi. You cannot fund $941 million in new spending, almost $1 billion in new spending that he has proposed. Now, he's proposed it because he thinks he can go out and he can pick up some votes from this group, pick up some votes from this group, pick up some votes from this group, and he'll figure it all out later. But the reality is you can't propose almost $1 billion in new spending without raising people's taxes. Now, let's look at this list here. Medicaid expansion, for instance. Expanding Obamacare. Everybody agrees that it's going to cost about $220 million in state matching funds. But philosophically, he says it's not going to cost the state anything because the hospitals are going to pay for it through hospital taxes. Now, let me tell you what that means to people who get sick. It means that the patients are going to pay for it because the hospitals, as you know, don't have this $220 million in extra money lying around. What's going to happen is your insurance premiums are going to go up to pay for those additional taxes. Let's look at these other things that he says he wants to fund. The reality is, when you add it all up, it's almost $1 billion a year in new spending. By my calculations, and I've been involved in government finance now for 16 years, I've taken the state of Mississippi from a budget, the last time the Democrats were in charge in the governor's office, there was $720 million out of balance. Previous Democrat governor that we had spent $720 million in one-time money on recurring expenses. It took us some time, but we were able to clean that up. We now have a truly balanced budget with only recurring revenue being spent to fund recurring expenses. We have a rainy day fund that is full with $554 million in our rainy day fund. And I will tell you, we have done the math, and it's going to cost the average taxpayer in Mississippi $774 per year to fund the programs that Jim Hood has proposed. And so the choice in this election is simple. If you believe that you want to send $800 more per taxpayer in your household to Jackson for the bureaucrats to spend, then you probably ought to be for him. But if you believe that you already spend enough money and you already send enough money to Jackson to fund our core government functions, and that you know better how to spend your money than that government in Jackson, that government in Washington, D.C. knows how to spend it, then you probably ought to vote for the conservative in the race. You ought to vote for the Republican in the race, and therefore you ought to vote for Tate Reeves. And so, again, I want to thank the owners of this small business for hosting us here today. I want to thank the press for coming out. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was getting close to the election or something, right? We're 13 days out, and I think it's important that the voters throughout Mississippi know the real choices that they're going to have to make in 13 days. Look beyond the 30-second TV ads that claim that the liberal Democrat in this race will not raise your taxes, and just look at the real hard numbers and what he has proposed and what it's ultimately going to cost you. It's almost $800 per taxpayer. So when you start looking at how much that's going to cost your family, whether you have a family of 2 or a family of 4 or a family of 6, it starts getting to be real money. And I don't believe you ought to have to send any more of your money to Jackson. I believe we can do just like we did in the most recent special session, where we funded additional $1.2 billion in improving Mississippi's infrastructure without raising anybody's taxes. I believe we can continue down that path. That's why I'm running for governor, and thank y'all for being here.
Tate, any reaction to the Mason-Dixon poll that shows you 46 to 43 to Jim Hood?
Well, I will tell you that you've probably heard me give this answer before. There's been a lot of polls that have come out over the last 3 or 4 months, and the fact of the matter is the only poll that matters is the poll that comes out on election day. The only poll that matters is the poll that comes out on November the 5th when they start counting who voted. A wise man told me many months ago during this campaign, I was down in rural South Mississippi, and he came up to me and he said, Tate, here's what you need to remember about this campaign. He said, on election night, they're not going to count how much money you got. They're not going to count how many friends you got. They're going to count how many people vote for you. And so polls at this point are not all that important to me. I do think when you look at the history of this particular poll, it certainly shows that we have momentum in this campaign. There is no doubt that conservatives are rallying behind our efforts. Obviously, President Trump, Vice President Pence's involvement in our campaign is helpful with respect to that. We're honored to have certainly the president coming to Mississippi in the next 10 days, and maybe we'll have some more surrogates coming as well. We're honored to have their support. But when you look at that particular poll, it has a history of being very generous to Democrats. That particular polling outfit had us way behind as recently as a few months ago. So I think we definitely have momentum in the campaign. But here's what the voters need to understand. This race is going to be close. It's going to be a close race. What's going to decide the outcome is who actually goes to the polls and vote. That's the reason we're working so hard to turn out conservative voters across Mississippi to go vote for the only conservative running for governor.
If Mississippians they don't want higher taxes, as you say, they don't want liberal, etc. Why then is it going to be a close race, and why then do you have to call on the president to come down here and turn out votes?
Well, look, there are a few liberals that live in Mississippi. There are a few Democrats that live in Mississippi. In fact, there are probably 45% of Mississippians fit into that category. But the reality is that the majority, and for perhaps the vast majority of Mississippians, are conservative. They don't want new taxes. They don't want us to expand the size and the scope of government. Most Mississippians believe that if government will get out of the way, then they will have the ability to grow their businesses, to grow their families, to invest in their businesses, to invest in their families. And I think that that's something that the vast majority of Mississippians will want. But look, we have a political environment today in which the liberal Democrats, particularly those in Washington, D.C., are trying to move this country so far to the left that I think at the end of the day, conservatives are going to show up to the election in 13 days, and they're going to vote overwhelmingly to elect Republicans up and down the ticket. I think we'll have a great day on November the 5th for Republican House members. I think we'll have a great day on November the 5th for Republican Senate members. And I think we're going to have a great day on November 5th for Republican candidates in all 8 statewide elected offices. I will predict that if we can get our people to go vote, and that's what we're talking about today, if we can get our people to go vote, then we're going to have an outstanding day on November the 5th.
Is there anything on that list to your right that you support?
Well, I'll give you an example. The statewide pre-K number is a number and a program that we actually created under my watch. This is called the Early Learning Collaboratives, and so I appreciate the fact that Attorney General Hood has endorsed our efforts to expand pre-kindergarten throughout Mississippi. So there's certainly some things that I support. I'll give you another example, and I don't know if it's on this list or not, but certainly we believe that we have a responsible plan to increase teacher pay. The difference between Attorney General Hood and myself is he's just making a bunch of promises. He's never proved that he can actually deliver on those promises. What I have proven during my tenure as Lieutenant Governor, when I commit to something, I actually go out and get it done. And that's the reason that teachers across Mississippi know that when I say we can raise teacher pay by $4,300 per teacher over a 4-year period and get us to the southeastern average, they know that if I have crunched the numbers, which I have, and I believe that we can afford it, then we'll actually make it happen.
The officials in states that are spending Medicaid said it's actually saved them money. Have you looked at those numbers, and I mean, are they all wrong when you're right?
Could you explain to me which officials that you've talked to, Bobby?
In Louisiana,
specifically,
Virginia.
You talked to which officials,
Well,
Bobby? The governors or the Medicaid directors,
the
or
numbers put out by their budget committees.
Okay, well, let's talk about Louisiana's a great place to talk. First of all, I think we're going to have a Republican governor get elected in Louisiana the week after I get elected here. But Louisiana is a prime example. of why we should not expand Obamacare in Mississippi. There was a report that was done recently which showed that somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 Louisiana residents per year, between 3,000 and 5,000 Louisiana residents per month, between 40,000 and 60,000 Louisiana residents per year are being moved off of private health insurance and moved onto government health insurance. Now, what that means is those 3,000 to 5,000 per month that are moving from the private sector, that means it is shrinking the pool of the number of people that have private insurance. That means those individuals that have private insurance in Louisiana are going to see their premiums increase because the providers that are now, in our case, I think it would be up to 100,000 Mississippians that would move from private insurance to the Medicaid rolls. The providers actually get a smaller reimbursement rate from the Medicaid program than they get from private insurers. And so it's not only not good for the individuals that are moving because they're not getting as good a health insurance, it's also not good for the providers because they're getting lesser reimbursement rates. And so I do not believe that it has saved other states money. In fact, you look at the state of Indiana, which has been talked about a good bit in this race, and I'm honored to have Vice President Pence's support in this campaign, and I'm hopeful that he'll come to Mississippi, and I think he probably will over the next couple of weeks. But I will tell you, if you look there, their total Medicaid expenditures since they expanded Medicaid in Indiana are up, I believe, $9 billion a year. That is not saving anybody money.
Do you think he made a mistake? So you think he made a mistake by expanding Medicaid?
Look, I'm focused on doing what's best for Mississippi. I do not believe it is in the best interest of Mississippi taxpayers to expand Obamacare in Mississippi.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.